We open on a tower, the wind howling as it bites at the 6 figures on the balcony. Above them, an imposing figure laughs gleefully, the crackling lightning reflecting off of his white fangs. An imposing figure in white armor races forward, lance raised upward, at the white-fanged tyrant, gold scales gleaming in the fire crackling from her nostrils. As she leaps into the air, poised to stab the vampire through, she finds herself instead stopping short, her breath caught in her throat as the clawed hand drives deeper into her chest. With a careless flick of his hand, the once noble paladin goes crashing into the stony balcony, her heart pulsing hundreds of feet above. Chuckling, he drops the heart with a sickening thud onto the cobblestone below. Down to 5. A tall, broad human wielding a greatsword roars in anger as he races towards the vampire, his face illuminated with holy glow as an elven cleric shouts draconic incantations, casting the fighter in a protective blow. Not to be caught off guard, the vampire deftly steps just out of the fighter's reach. But not before the psychic hand of the fighter catches a small, 3-petaled orchid shaped like a bat, sending it flying through the air. Without a moment's breath, the cleric leaps for the small trinket, grabbing it midair and vanishing through a swirling portal of golden magic, leaving nothing but a trail of smoke. Furious, the vampire grabs the fighter by the back of his neck, and with considerable force, tosses him off the balcony's edge. The sound of his fall is lost in the howling wind and the echoing thunder. Absorbed in his kill, the vampire shakes by a shattering force as 4 arcane missiles pummel his side. He turns viciously to face the remaining party member. The glowing stone at the hilt of the female warrior's sword, still crackling with arcane magic. A young woman and an 18-year-old boy stand timidly behind him. The female warrior grits her teeth and yells, "Let it go, Strahd! I won't let you take this girl. My husband was able to break your focus, and my friend has run off with it to another plane. Just give in and stand down. I know your powers are weakened." The vampire sneers, his white fangs forming a vile grin.
Do not tell me what powers I have, little girl. You are but a speck, and we've history itself. You should be the one who should stand down.
The female warrior yells as she swings her blade, a cold blue piece of steel covered in frost and shrouded in mist, upon Strahd von Zarovich. Unfazed, the vampire lord allows the hit to land solidly in his shoulder, close enough to the war wizard's hands to yank her forward and into his grasp. Strahd's teeth plunge into the warrior's neck. Her body, now drained of its life force, falls limp to the ground. The young woman, tall and broad with dark hair and ice blue eyes, stands protectively in front of the 18-year-old boy. A figure of similar look, but much less imposing in size, his slighter, more frail build speaking more to a scholar than that of his sister. Strahd smiles a hellish grin, his face stained in the blood of the warcaster wizard on the ground.
Avrina, my love, your ill-fated attempt to have me killed has failed. Your friends are dead. Must you lose your only brother as well?
Avrina shakes her head, a defiant no.
Your fate is sealed then.
As he says this, Strahd lunges forward with unholy speed. He reaches past Avrina, grabbing the 18-year-old boy from behind her, sending the kid's glasses clattering to the stone. Without hesitation, Strahd sinks his teeth into the boy's neck, lining the fangs up with a wound from a previous bite. Avrina gasps. This made 3. In pain, her brother Malfinius pulls away from Strahd, immediately doubling over and retching, his body convulsing with pain as his once blue eyes begin to change to a vibrant blood red. Avrina lunges forward, slapping Strahd across the face. "Curse you, Strahd von Zarovich!" Ignoring her, Strahd grabs Drake by the neck, drawing the small-framed boy to the edge of the balcony. Lifting the dark-haired youth over the edge with one hand, Strahd turns back to Avrina.
It seems my threat to turn your little brother wasn't enough, my dear. So now I must offer a new deal. Marry me by light of this full moon, or watch as I curse the neck of your fragile little brother, and drop his body thousands of feet off this tower, all while he writhes in agony, becoming a newly formed vampire spawn.
She hesitates and then gathers strength within herself. She raises her head and replies, I will marry you, Strahd von Zarovich, but only on one condition. You return my brother to our home in Barovia and promise never to afflict him again. Not a call, not a scratch, not even an ill-placed thought. You bring him home and forget he ever existed. The boy squirms in Strahd's grasp. Strahd's grip tightens.
I do this, and you agree to be my bride, to return my Tatiana to me forever.
He extends his hand, reaching out towards the reluctant woman on the tower. She places her hands in his. Her warm brown skin a stark contrast to the pale death color of the tyrant she was now betrothed to. I do. Hello there, listeners, and welcome to the Edgelords of Barovia. A Sultans and Dragons podcast, an actual play podcast where one high school teacher attempts to play Dungeons and Dragons with her students, many of whom are playing for the first time. This is our first episode. We're doing a bit of a recap to get you caught up on our adventure thus far.
My name is Lucifer Aralis. However, I have always been called Lucy by everyone who knew me. I didn't have much growing up. It was just me and my sister Lilith. We were happy, and she was the sweetest sister ever. I didn't have many skills of my own to help Lilith out. She pretty much did everything for the two of us, and everything she did was to help. She tried her best to make some money, but everyone would just rip her off and use her. It never made sense to me. Why would anyone put up with that? As I grew up, I found something that I was really good at: thievery and deception. I was able to steal a lot of money from people on the streets, and Lilith never knew what I was doing. She always thought that I had found some kind of odd job. I was able to support my sister and myself for the first time ever, and I felt good about it. But I was just doing my thing as usual, stealing money from the rich people who ran the city and lying if I got caught. I thought I was really good at it, but I messed up one day. I tried to steal money from one of the highest ranking and snobbiest nobles in the city. He had a bodyguard who was able to notice what I did. The noble had me and my sister go to court for this. I tried to lie my way out of it yet again, but it just made things worse. I had nobody but my sister on my side, and I thought that was enough, but it wasn't. I was found guilty. Or, miraculously, my sister was found guilty. She was put up for execution and I for exile. The last words she ever said were,
Make sure to survive, dear brother.
and the axe was slammed down right on her neck. Ever since then, I've only ever stolen from the dead and lied to myself. I refuse to make the same mistakes that got my sister killed. I will never allow anyone to suffer for my mistakes ever again.
Hi, I'm Silgor. I'm not a normal elf. I ended up with the webbed hands and gills as a side effect of an experiment that I willingly volunteered for. It was supposed to be something that advanced society, but it didn't work. Afterwards, I found other interests. I had a lot of them, and I picked up some skills. In the end, though, I was never really sure what to specialize in. I had options like becoming a sellsword or an inventor. I settled on becoming a sailor in the end due to my changes. On one of my adventures, I ventured into a dark-colored sea. The water looked almost black, and there was a heavy fog. It wrapped around my ship and myself, and suddenly I found myself on a forest path. I walked down the path, and I stumbled upon some kind of camp with a bonfire in the center.
My name is KN0 Informational Technician Robot, but you can call me Know It. I'm 5. I come from a religious clan of robots who made the K line of robots to gather as much information as possible and import it to the mother database. That was until my clan was wiped out by undead warriors. Luckily, I was able to escape, and I fled to a church. There was a very welcoming man, and he taught me how to use my religion to help others instead of bottling my anger. After the man set me up, and I felt ready to get back into society, I wandered into the forest. After wandering around for weeks, completely lost, I ended up hiding under a tree to escape the rain. After hearing a commotion, I met some unlikely friends. As I walk deeper into the forest, I see a bright light, a welcoming light. I decided that, well, whatever it is probably better than standing under this tree. I walk in and I see a group of people. I see 2 other people who look like they don't belong. But I see a group of people gathered around the campfire.
This is a boneyard, the same boneyard I have been in for several years. This particular night, I was replacing the bones of my right foot after facing off with the same pack of wolves who had taken my femur the week before. As I sit counting bones, I heard footsteps crunching towards me. I glanced up to see a small framed 18-year-old kid with braces and glasses. He seems lost, lonely. With an exasperated sigh, he reaches down, pulling me out of the bone pit.
Are you Boney Jack?
His words rang through my head like a bell. As I tower over this kid, he shows almost no fear, not even a flinch as he stares at me. He glances down at a small globe in his hand, whispering,
You sure this is the guy?
The kid stops talking to himself and extends a hand.
I came to give you a job. How do you feel about being my bodyguard while I try and find my sister?
Poor kid, couldn't have been any older than 18. He must have gotten separated from her. Since then, I have been at his side 24/7, making sure to keep him safe from trouble. This is a lot better than that old boneyard. Although he does make me wear a disguise.
I've been on the run for 5 years now. There was rain, and then the forest in front of me was heavy with fog. A fog that was weirdly enticing. I went in, moving the leaves and vines out of the way of my sight. And eventually I came upon a small camp with a large bonfire in the center of it. The camp was run by the Vistani, a group of wanderers in this world. It had seemed that I traveled into a different realm, but I know that this path leads straight to the next city. and I know for sure that there weren't any safe places to camp along this path. The Vistani had given me an offer. They would let me travel with them as long as I gave them protection with some of the two outsiders that I met. The three of us went on ahead to scout for monsters or traps or anything of the sort, and we ended up stumbling upon a human dweeby teenager who can use magic and a monster with a pumpkin head fighting a pair of direwolves. It seemed like the teen was ordering the monster around. It was quite the team dynamic they had, honestly. We decided to help them, and during the battle I tried to stay out of the way and let the others do the fighting. I snuck towards the wolves through the cover of the trees while the hybrid used magic with the teenager. We let the Warforged and Pumpkin monsters take any incoming attacks while they landed some pretty heavy hits. The fight was fairly easy, and we killed one direwolf while the other got away. After beating back the wolves, we made conversation with the two travelers. Eventually this led to that, and the teenager and Pumpkin monster ended up joining us on our travel, while the Vistani set up camp once again. We were called to a certain tent, and an elderly woman introduced herself as Madame Eva. She was creepy and mysterious. She didn't feel threatening though. She gave us a fortune telling of some sort, and after that weird interaction, we all introduced ourselves to each other. The hybrid was Silgor. He said that he wanted to leave his mark on the world. The Warforged was Noet. He was 5 and searching for knowledge. The teenager revealed himself to be a vampire, and his name was Drake, while the pumpkin monster revealed himself to be an undead skeleton soldier named Jack. At about that time, we got this oddly specific letter from this guy named Strahd. The Vistani were suddenly very frightful and discriminatory to us afterwards. They pretty much kicked us out of the camp and left us to fend for ourselves. Drake had explained that this was because the Vistani are not kind or friendly to the people who are associated with Strahd in any way, and then we headed for a place called Barovia.
After we left the Vistani camp, we followed a road that took us to Barovia. There, we saw some lonely, ominous, decrepit church where we heard screams. "Father, I'm hungry!" We decided to save that for later. We then saw a pub where we decided to take a break from the town, where it feels like no one smiles, except one man. There we met a very, energetic man named Ismark. A tall, blonde, beautiful man claiming to be Drake's best friend. I instantly dismissed him as a threat. Compared to the rest of the worn-down citizens of Barovia, he had a very charismatic pep in his step. He greeted us with open arms, and we decided to interact with the other patrons. There, we met 2 frightened kids who claimed that a monster lived in their house. They asked us to help them out, so we had to accept. We traveled to their house that we nicknamed the Murder House. It was a 3-story grand manor that was probably owned by very wealthy folks. The children had informed us that their parents were home, but the house looked abandoned, almost as if no one had lived there for a long time. We gathered our courage as we prepared to enter the house.
We went inside, leaving the kids in front of the house. I watched Noah and Jack compete to see who would get attacked first after kicking down a door. They would take turns doing so, and they got first pick in each of the rooms that they entered. It was quite entertaining. The ghost that was haunting the house attacked us a few times while Jack and Noah were kicking down doors. It kept phasing through the walls and screaming at the top of its lungs. They hurt me. As we were exploring, we found a library with a very interesting painting. Jack also found the painting and agreed that it was very intriguing. Lucy and Drake came in pointing out how big the room really was, and they found a letter from Strahd. After we entered the master bedroom, we found a crib with a baby corpse inside. Jack decided to pick it up, and then the ghost came back and kept attacking us until eventually running away. Lucy came up with the idea to throw the baby's corpse out the window, and I was completely on board with that, but we decided to put it in the arms of the updating Noah. After finding them, both Rose and Thorn inside the house as ghosts, we found out that the ones outside were imposters. The children phased into Drake's body, Drake making him moodier than usual and scared of everything. Because of the kids' past trauma, they refused to let Drake leave the room till we handled the ghosts on this level. Eager to get Drake back, we explored the attic, finding a box of items that belonged to the Banshee. Angry that we touched her things, she leapt to the floor and attacked us. We faced her down and beat her, but not without a few missed firebolts and bad sword swings. As she faded, she screamed a curse upon the family, claiming they murdered her and sacrificed her in a crazy cult ceremony in the basement. The monster upstairs now taken care of, we head to the basement.
After dealing with everything upstairs, the bossy little girl in my head forced us to face the monsters in the basement. Our first room was filled with several tombs, each bearing the name of a family member, and most of them a zombie. After several rounds of Jack, Noah, and Lucy slashing at them, and Selgor and I firing spells, we managed to take all the zombies down. This allowed us to properly lay the bodies of Rosevalda and Thornvold to rest. Huzzah! But instead, the snot-faced little girl decided to transfer her spirit into a small bird-like dragon with black feathers and sharp teeth. Great. My familiar's a 7-year-old know-it-all. From there, we went through several rooms that were reminiscent of a church, more likely a cult. Every time we turn around, there seems to be this god-awful chanting coming from every single room. Athen Agad Ar. I'm not exactly sure on the translation, but I'm pretty sure it comes out to, do you know him? I'm not sure what that exactly means given everything that's down here, but I get the feeling it can't be good. Nothing too out of the ordinary for Barovia, though. That is, till we reached the chapel. A grotesque room made out of human remains, pillars made of bones held together with innards and sinew. At its center, in a recess in the wall, a terrifying statue with 3 eye slots and an unnatural set of horns, straddling over a broken statue of Strahd, claws ripping at everything it looked at. As we stood there, everyone grew uncomfortable. Terrible screeching came from everywhere at once, and next thing I know, this creature is in front of me, ripping, tearing. I have just enough left to glance as he races down the hall past Lucy and Silver, holding my own face as he looks back at me. And then I passed out. Several moments later, I woke up and apparently my face is still intact. I honestly don't imagine how it could be. But we take a rest, gather ourselves, and continue going through this hellhole of a basement. The next room we reach is something I've never really experienced before. Not a church, not a chapel, not even a reliquary. Just this room with 16 stone pedestals, each holding some small statue. The room is a sense of dread that explodes from every point of it. But there's some things in here that just don't make sense. There's a statue of a fairy wrapped in black inky tentacles that try to hold it in place. There's this book that's got a castle in it that has this black hole that rises from the center of it. And then there's the statue of Strahd. Again, broken. Lucy started to get really uneasy in here and wished to keep moving on, so we kind of rushed out of there. Would have loved to have stayed and actually looked at each of these, but time's of the essence, I guess.
After we reached the basement, we entered this large room with a big black altar. It was huge, kind of like a stage. Along the walls, there was this ledge above the floor, kind of like a sitting stool. I wondered and watched this room expecting something to appear before I was snapped out of my thoughts. Drake was holding my hand tightly. He looked very timid. As he squeezed my hand tightly, I held his hand and helped calm him down as we went to explore the walls. After about 2 minutes of a nerve-wracking silence, a ton of ghosts faced the walls, their pale, see-through bodies almost disappearing in the dim light. They stood surrounding the altar, in the center of the room, chanting, "One must die. One must die. One must die. One must die." We noticed something was off with Lucy. He seemed entranced. His eyes were glazed over, and before anyone could react, Lucy whipped out his dagger and attempted to stab Noah. And suddenly, we were fighting our friend. He wasn't weak, but he was outnumbered. Noah made a grab for Lucy, but he dodged out of the way. Just as Silgor fired off a firebolt, hitting Lucy in the side. He jumped a few feet away, but before we could have another move at him, Drake used a spell that blinded Lucy with electricity and thusly knocked him out. Once Lucy was down, the room shook a bit as the roof fell. The walls crumbled down, and from that rose this monster of mush. Drake let go of my hand, grabbed Lucy, and took off up to the house. Silgor followed, then Noah. I saw that Noah couldn't outrun it, so I tried to buy him some time. I drew my sword and slashed at this thing as hard as I could, putting a giant gash in the thing, or so I thought. When I looked to where I slashed, the cuts weren't even there. I felt my heart sink before the monster returned the favor. It hit me so hard it knocked my head off and sunk into the wall to chase the others. I heard Drake yell, and I had to keep moving. After pulling myself together, I exited the room. I took off running, trying to get out. I moved as fast as I could, but Silgor and Noah weren't as lucky. This thing rammed its way through the giant warforge, knocking him over and leaving him. I could hear its deep laugh as I ran. Once I hit the stairs, things started to slow. Silgor and Noah made it right after me. This thing shook and rattled the metal stairs as we climbed. Once I hit the attic, I caught a glimpse of Silgor and Drake. You could hear its roar of anger as the house rattled and shook. We rushed out of the house as fast as we could, feeling the floor begin to crumble. I leaped to safety, hearing the others do the same. Once the dust settled, what was a 4-story family home was a pile of rubble. Whatever that was needed to stay buried in that pile and never see the light of day again.
We cut to Castle Ravenloft, the tall, imposing fortress that looms over the land of Barovia, like a skeletal hand clawing at the sky above. We travel through the cold stone corridors to the room of Strahd and his bride. We see the vampire lord himself, seated at a desk, blood-red ink dripping from the tip of his pen as he signs his name to a letter. With a vicious sneer, he folds the letter into an intricate bat, infusing it with magic, as he takes it to the window and releases it into the haze of dawn. He watches the bat message flitter into the perpetual fog, a look of self-satisfied glee touching the corners of his lips. As he stands at the window, the lithe, delicate arms of his wife sneak around his chest. "And to what trouble is my lord about today?" she purrs, resting her head in the center of his back. "You seem uncharacteristically chipper." Strahd turns his eyes, meeting those of his current bride.
I have sent another letter to the latest heroes to enter our realm, my love. I have quite enjoyed their feeble attempts to conquer my realm thus far.
He turns and takes his wife into his arms.
And what schemes do you have, my Arena? You seem to be more personable than normal.
Arena leans in, a sly smile fleeting across her fangs as she runs a hand through Strahd von Zarovich's hair. Schemes? Her eyes flash a brilliant red as she pulls him into a dramatic kiss. As they break apart for a moment, she smirks seductively. I prefer the term assassination plot. Lost in the sudden passion of his usually apathetic wife, Strahd von Zarovich is caught uncharacteristically off guard. A flash of silver, searing, burning pain, and the slow, painful trip of 1,000 years of power and hate coming to an end. Strahd grasps at his chest, a silver stake protruding from the place where his heart should be. His wife of 50 years standing before him, glaring in hate as the once powerful vampire lord falls to his knees. A black, billowing shadow forms behind her. She laughs, and a voice seems to echo from the shadow's depths.
Look, just as I promised, the beast that rules this plane has fallen. Now all his power belongs to us.
Irina smiles as she watches the monster who ruined her life gasp in pain. But what she first assumed was his dying breaths transforms to a cruel, deep laugh as Strahd von Zarovich's grimace of pain turns to a wicked smile.
You think my power would transfer to you, my unfaithful bride? You are more foolish than that beast you made a deal with.
Strahd grins as a red glow starts to emanate from the floor around him, as magic flows through the sigil made of his own blood. In panic, Irina rushes to the far side of the room, knowing too well the horror Strahd's magic can wreak.
Do not run. Stop him before he is finished.
The shadow snarls, halting Irina in her tracks, forcing her to once again face the dying vampire lord. But her momentary terror is just enough time for the powerful vampire to complete his spell.
I am Strahd von Zarovich, demigod of the plains of Dread, and lord of the land Barovia. With my final breath I say, may none but the true heir of Strahd take my place. May the land only yield itself to the will of Strahd, and may only the spawn of my fang hold my power. Thus the will of Strahd von Zarovich.
With a crackle of power, Strahd thrust his hand through the center of the magic circle, exploding to dust and ash on contact. A ripple of power flowing through the plains of dread as the former Lord of Barovia dies. In his place, a single, delicate orchid, shaped like a bat. The dark purple petals seeming to taunt Irina and her newfound dark god. "What now, O forgotten god?" Irina asks.
We need to find his spawn, his true heir. We cannot let his heir gain power.
Irina smiles. "Fear not, I know who his heir may be, and I know just how to get him to yield his power to us." As Irina kneels down and plucks the small orchid from the floor, turning it in her fingers, I think it's time for a little family reunion. And that concludes today's episode of Sultans and Dragons. Our cast is Isaiah as Noet, Logan as Silgar, Matthew as Lucy, Seth as Jack, and I'm your DM, Miss Rojas. Till next time, listeners, off the guitar.